I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on here?
Well, I think the more we learn about it and the more we talk about it, it's going to be clear that it's really a lot more than just a fraternal organization. That might be how they get you in.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more than that, I think.
I'd tell any church member, I'd say, you need to get out of that organization. What are you doing? Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to another edition of the Uncensored Pilgrims. I'm Marty McLain, along with the irrepressible
Paul Price.
And we are down in the bunker basement. And
We're bunking down.
We are bunking down in the basement, and we are going to talk about a kind of a controversial topic. Not that we, don't talk about controversial topics.
I think we've run the gamut pretty much of...
We are controversial.
Of every controversial topic we can think of.
Well,
in fact, if you're listening to this on YouTube, and there's something controversial that we haven't talked about, why don't you put it in the comments and maybe we'll talk about it in the future.
Yeah,
we're trying to hit all the bases.
We'll give you our 2 cents. I'm sorry, with Bidenflation, our 3 cents worth, if you would like to have that.
More like 10 cents.
10 cents, okay. We are going to talk today about Freemasonry.
Actually, what we're doing down here is we're hiding from those drones that are attacking.
The drones are everywhere.
The drone attack.
Who knows, perhaps when...
Attack of the drones.
When this episode airs, something may have happened with those drones. I hope not.
I don't know what's going on with those drones, but it seems pretty weird.
If it's controversial, we may have to have a episode on drones.
On drones.
The Drone Wars.
Yeah.
I think that's already been done, right?
No, that's the Clone Wars.
Oh, that's Clone Wars, yeah.
These are the Drone Wars.
There have been things with Usher and others that had the Cologne Wars.
Oh.
Yeah. Did you ever try Usher's fragrance?
No, not at all. You're talking about the rapper?
Whatever he does.
We just watched a movie, The Fall of the House of Usher.
And it had nothing to do
with Edgar Allan Poe story.
So one about Peace Up, A-Town Down?
No.
Nothing like that?
No. Has nothing to do with that.
Okay, nothing to do with the Atlanta music scene, huh?
Nothing at all.
The Fall of the House of Usher. I've heard of that movie. I think I just kind of skipped it.
It's an old Bonanza era, 60s Vincent Price movie.
Yeah, he was a creepy dude.
Yeah. And
Paul, what do you know about Freemasons?
That's a tough question. I think I know somewhat little about them, and I think that's by design, isn't it?
Well, they are kind of secretive.
They are secretive.
As a matter of fact, you have to, when you are an initiate into Freemasonry, you have to take some pretty serious oaths. Like one of them I've read somewhere, it's, quote, all this I most solemnly and sincerely promise and swear, binding myself under no less penalty than of having my throat cut from ear to ear, my tongue torn out by its roots, and buried in the sands of the sea at low water mark, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 25 hours, should I, in the least knowingly or wittingly, violate or transgress this my entered apprentice obligation. What do you think about that? I mean, did you do that when you became a member of the Redcoat Marching Band?
Nothing like that, no.
I mean, you didn't have to, I promised to blow my trumpet or...
No, I think it was more, I promised to drink 3 cases of beer at each game or prior to each game. No, I don't know.
Well, here's another one. Following this declaration, the initiate is required to take a blood oath swearing allegiance to the lodge and pledging to protect all the secrets of Masonry. This is an article I'm reading. This blood oath, repeated by every Mason who has joined the lodge, goes like this. Once again, it says, quote, binding myself under no less penalty than having my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by its roots, and buried in the rough sands of the sea. And the article continues, blood oaths such as this one are not limited to the initiation ceremony, but are repeated at each new degree of the Mason as the Mason progresses through the secrets of Freemasonry.
And I think, Marty, maybe the most important angle we could take on this topic is the Christian biblical one of the question, as a Christian, should I be involved? Is it appropriate for a Christian to be involved with the Freemasons?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can get into a lot, but I think for the perspective of where we come from, that's probably the most important question, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, because you have a lot of people that are Christians that are Freemasons. I mean, you have millions of Freemasons in the United States, and I've known people who are Masons who are in churches. And, a lot of them will tell you, hey, it's just a fraternal organization. We just, we commit to keeping our word and we commit to doing good things.
Yeah, it's not the only organization of its kind either. I don't know if you've ever heard of any of the other ones out there. There's one called the Odd Fellows. You ever heard of the Odd Fellows?
No, but I've known Odd Fellows. But I've never heard of an organization called Odd Fellows.
Yes, the Odd Fellows. It's a much like the Masons. It's a society, a fraternal organization.
Yeah.
Not nearly as widespread as the Masons are, obviously, but it's another one out there. The Odd Fellows. They have lodges.
Huh.
They do just like the Masons. But
growing up, I remember we had a Moose Lodge, an Elk Lodge. Those are fraternal organizations.
I think it's like that. Odd Fellows is another one.
But there's
like
a little
that.
something more to the Freemasons.
I think the Freemasons maybe go a bit further.
Yeah, because I've never seen anybody do a Moose Lodge ceremony at a funeral. Now, I've seen a Freemason funeral. It's different, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on here?
Well, I think the more we learn about it and the more we talk about it, it's going to be clear that it's really a lot more than just a fraternal organization. That might be how they get you in.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more than that, I think.
Well, let me give you a little bit of history on Freemasonry. This I did a paper with some guys when I was in seminary on the subject, and here's what we found out, quote, Masonry began as a trade organization during the Middle Ages as a guild of stonemasons which traveled from one building site to another. The few references of them in literature reveal that they did not meet in lodges, have a complex system of degrees, or participate in any of the secret rituals which characterize modern Freemasonry. There was nothing cultic or occultic about them. The modern Freemasonry movement began on June 24, 1717, when the Grand Lodge of London was organized at the Goose and Gridiron Tavern. Many Masonic writings call this, quote, revival of Freemasonry in England, unquote. But since there is no evidence that the system or plan of Freemasonry existed prior to 1717, there was nothing to be revived. It appears that these ideas of an ancient line of Freemasons are largely the mythical construction of highly imaginative Masonic writers. When Freemasonry began in 1717, it began as a gentleman's club which met from time to time in various taverns. Such clubs were places where wealthy and influential men could meet to talk, drink, smoke, play cards, or just sit and read the paper. The first Grand Lodge was thus established by the upper class, and any real stonemason that showed up to one of these meetings would never have gotten through the front door. This is just our opinion. One would search in vain to find any documentable references to pagan mysteries, occultic arts, or ancient deities in early Freemasonry. In fact, the most influential men in the inceptive years of the movement were devout Anglican clergymen. The first writer who tried to make a tie with the occult was the French Freemason Abbé Robin in 1780. He claimed that Masonry was the present guardian of the ancient mystery religions. Other French Masons picked up on this theme and wrote that since the beginnings of the world, there has always been one true religion. But the religion was secret and the average man could not understand it, and thus it was hidden or disguised under popular world religions. All the great masters like Buddha, Moses, Jesus, Zoroaster, Muhammad, and Krishna knew the secret teachings but did not reveal them. These writers saw Freemasonry as the hidden church which carried these ideas down through the centuries. The French writers claimed that the evidence which would document their claims had been destroyed. The novel
Convenient, huh?
Yeah. That kind of sounds a little bit like Gnosticism a little bit, right?
It's extremely Gnostic, actually, yes.
The novel teachings,
the hidden knowledge.
The novel teachings of the French Freemasons gained widespread acceptance into the English lodges through the writings of Albert Pike. In 1871, Pike compiled the works of the various French writers into his book Morals and Dogma, which basically espoused the Hindu doctrine of reincarnation and mixed in a bit of astrology and occultic magic. Pike would soon reorganize the Scottish Rite to follow the mystery cult practices of the French Lodge. It was also during this time that the American Freemasons, which had thus far been largely immune to the teachings of the French Lodge, would now come under its cultic influence. The first American Masons to follow Pike into paganism were the leaders of the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. Since that time, they have consistently published only those writers who have used pagan religions such as Hinduism to interpret the rituals and symbols of the craft. The insertion of paganism into the American lodges has continued until this very day. In fact, while the teachings of Pike and other paganizers are propagated during lodge meetings, Christians are not allowed to do so. While pagan Masons can openly evangelize the lodge membership, Christians are told to remain silent about their religious beliefs. They cannot even close their prayers in the name of Jesus. So if Masonry continues this direction, it will simply become another occultic pagan religion hostile to the exclusive claims of Christ. It will no longer be a fraternity of good-hearted men. Instead, it will be just one more cult tied to the condemning ideas of Eastern religion. So this is something we wrote back in the early 1990s. And I think that a lot of the Freemasons are trying to get away from the Albert Pike, who actually was a Confederate general.
And you found that information without even having access to the internet, apparently.
Yes, early on. I mean,
you didn't use Google to find that info,
this was done before the internet. This was done when we had to look at the books and magazines and such. But Albert Pike was actually a Civil War Confederate general, and from what I've read, he was the only Confederate general who had an outdoor statue in Washington, D.C., but it was taken down by the people when they rioted about the George Floyd situation.
The Black Lives Matter riots?
Yes. That was taken down during that time. But this guy, Albert Pike, and I know a lot of the current Masons, they don't want, from what I can read, they don't want a lot to do with Albert Pike because he was a weird dude.
Yeah.
He brought some stuff in there, but his book was one of the books that they had reference.
According to Wikipedia, and I think these days Wikipedia, it's not necessarily giving you the truth, especially if you're looking at something that is controversial or political or religious. But I think these days, at the very least, you can say that when you look at Wikipedia, you're getting the so-called party line answer, or you're getting the standard answer, because it's these days Wikipedia is so heavily moderated.
Yeah.
You cannot change an article without being basically vetted by the Wikipedia team.
Yeah, so all that wiki stuff is crazy because, DJs have a site that they go to look up stuff.
DJs?
Yeah. It's called Wiki. All right,
there you go. There was our dad joke.
There we go. All right.
There was our weekly dad joke.
Yes,
there.
That was free, but it cost me.
Anyway, according to the highly vetted language that you will find on Wikipedia, it says, a copy of Morals and Dogma was given to new members of the Southern jurisdiction from the early 1900s until the mid-1970s. And in 1974, it was replaced by Clausen's commentaries on Morals and Dogma. So still related to Albert Pike's work there. With the release of the authorized edition of 2011, Morals and Dogma is once more being given to new Scottish Rite Masons in the Southern jurisdiction. So if they want to try to claim that he wasn't speaking for them, then exactly why is it that they're actually giving his work to new Masons? It seems to me that he does represent the thought, at least in the Scottish Rite, of Freemasonry.
Yeah. You got the the York Rite and the Scottish Rite as you get up into the higher degrees, up to the 32nd degree. I think there's a 33rd degree, but that's an honorary degree maybe.
Okay.
I'm not completely sure about that, but I know you have the Scottish Rite, you have the York Rite, and you have the Shriners.
Yes.
They do a lot of good things. I mean, a lot of kids have been helped by Shriners Hospital, and I mean, it's good to help kids, and I think that's wonderful, and they do it without charge. But at the same time, there's some stuff going on with, even with that section of the Shriners in the, they dress like, or they used to dress like Arabs. They used to dress like they were from the Middle East, and
they still wear those little Middle Eastern kind of caps, whatever you call those.
When I was growing
Fez.
up, when I was growing up in Vidalia, we had, obviously, as every town did, we had a Christmas parade. And you like to see the floats come through and, people throwing candy, and then the Shriners would show up.
Yeah.
And, it'd be these grown men on go-karts, and they'd be on little mini bikes.
Yeah.
And there was this one guy, and they'd play this music, dun 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 dun. And when they do the, he had this big old belly,
Yeah.
and it would be showing, and he would just bounce his belly out when the cymbals would clash.
Weird.
It was bizarre, and as a little child, you didn't know whether to be entertained or to
To be scared.
call 911.
Yeah.
But they would actually. It almost seemed like at times they would take over the Christmas parade. There's so many of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be more Shriners, more Shriners, more Shriners. I want some floats, I want some people throwing candy.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of was my experience with the Masons, with the Shriners, growing up. It's like, man, they're going to be in the parade, and that guy with the big belly showing is going to start poking his belly out. And I think most of them came from Savannah, probably.
Yeah.
They might have had a big setup down there.
Now, here, for anyone who, like you said, Marty, they're maybe involved with Masonry at a low level, and they want to say Masonry is just...
That would be the Blue Lodge.
Right. So they would say Masonry is just a harmless, philanthropic organization, a fraternal
That's
group.
a hard word to say.
Yeah. A fraternal group of guys who get together and try to do good things together, do work for a good cause type of thing. If that's all it is, then to that I would combat that idea by quoting directly from Albert Pike out of Morals and Dogma. And he says, this is in Albert Pike's words, "So Masonry jealously conceals its secrets and intentionally leads conceited interpreters astray. There is no sight under the sun more pitiful and ludicrous at once than the spectacle of the Prestons and the Webbs, not to mention the later incarnations of dullness and commonplace, undertaking to explain the old symbols of Masonry and adding to and improving them or inventing new ones." Now, to break in for a second, he talks about Prestons and Webbs. I had never heard of them, but I looked them up. And these were actually Freemasons who wrote books in their time attempting to explain the meaning of Freemasonic imagery and symbols and things.
Right.
So Albert Pike is actually mocking Freemasons who wrote books about the meaning of Freemasonry here, saying it's ludicrous to think that they're giving you the truth.
Yeah.
So that's very telling right there. You can't even trust people who are Freemasons to give you the true story because of what we're reading right here. And then Albert Pike continues, "To the circle enclosing the central point and itself traced between the two parallel lines," I think he's just talking about one of the symbols here, "a figure purely Kabbalistic. These persons have added the superimposed Bible and even reared on that the latter with 3 or 9 rounds, given a vapid interpretation." So he's kind of like just mocking what they're trying to say that something means, basically.
Yeah.
So you can't. What I'm getting at with this is you cannot trust these low-level explanations of what it means. It's a secret organization, and its symbols and its mysteries and everything have deeper meanings that are not going to be revealed even to lower-level Freemasons.
Yeah, I was actually speaking to a guy today that told me that his dad had been a Freemason before he became a Christian, before he got saved, and that he won't say anything about it. He no longer goes to the meetings, but he won't divulge anything. And I think, part of the whole thing with the Freemasons, they believe in the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, and the immortality of the soul. They believe in keeping your word. They believe, you need to be a man of your word. And if you say you're not going to say anything about any of this stuff, especially if you've taken blood oaths about it, then you don't talk about it. And so, even some people, when they come out of it, they just don't say anything about it because they've taken that blood oath, and they would just won't say anything. Years ago, back in the 1800s, there was a guy who was going to say something about it. This guy, his name is actually William Morgan, and in 1826, he was going to divulge the secrets of the Freemasons. And they said that he was allegedly abducted, and some people assume, that he was killed by the Freemasons, and no one could find him after that. And so that caused a little bit of a pushback, especially in the early 1800s toward Freemasonry in America, because prior to that, it had really been growing. A lot of people were embracing, a lot of men, a lot of men at one time in America. There was, I think, maybe 5% of all men were Freemasons at one time in early America. And, and some people looked at it, if you wanted to get ahead, you would become a Freemason. And some people say as many as 21 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. So it did have a pretty substantial impact upon our nation when we started out. I mean, you had a lot of people that were into it, but then some people would say, well, that was prior to the time of Albert Pike and some other people getting weird about things.
Yeah.
But you got to understand, you got these guys with doing all this symbolism. You've got them with the aprons that they wear, and if you ever see a Masonic funeral, there's some stuff that happens with that, and you're like, man, is this a pagan ceremony? What's going on here? It's just bizarre. So here's something we also did: the theology of Freemasonry. We'll know some of the stuff they believe, Paul. They believe in a supreme being who they rename a supreme architect of the universe, or supreme grand master, or the nameless one of 100 names. They have a dogma of service, the rituals for each degree. They have symbols inside their service. The letter G represents geometry and how God created the universe. The square and the compass serve to remind him to live a moral and upright life. The sacred book is any religious book to have the member swear their oath by, whether it's the Bible or the Quran. The three lesser lights, which are the sun, moon, and the Grand Master of the Lodge, to give them guidance. The lambskin is a reminder to live a pure and moral life. The rough ashlar, that is his natural state. The member is rough and imperfect, but he is to work at improving his life. Man has an immortal soul that will continue to exist after physical death, and they have prayer inside the lodge to a supreme being. So, I mean, you cannot say that they're not a religious organization. When you have a ceremony at somebody's death, and you're talking about them going into the celestial lodge, and you're talking about their good works, making them right with God.
Yes.
And you're saying that you have to have a holy book. Doesn't necessarily have to be a Bible. It can be the Quran or one of the Hindu books or whatever. It could be the Book of Mormon. The salvation in Masonry is based on three basic teachings. Like I mentioned, the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, and the immortality of the soul. They believe that God created everything and that no one religion has the only way to him. They believe that all men can go along his path to find what he feels is creation's design for him in the universe. And they believe that there is a celestial lodge above that a Mason, through building good character, can gain admission to it. Now, there's no mention in Jesus Christ in any of the ceremonies inside the lodge, and members are forbidden to pray in his name. The lodge de-emphasizes the person and the work of Christ and the triune God. Also, there is no emphasis on eternal life as being a gift from God, but is obtained through working.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that, man?
I mean, it's kind of, in a way, similar to the New Age philosophy. All religions lead to God, and salvation is by works. I mean, that's basically what everyone wants to believe these days. They don't want to say that anyone can be wrong, and they want to believe that they can earn their salvation, that you get what you earn, and that they can, that they can do it, as opposed to having to trust in God to do it.
What I would tell somebody, a Christian that is in Freemasonry, I would say, look, it is a competing religion. It devalues Jesus Christ. He is not the only way. You get entrance into heaven through your character, which is works, which is a complete departure from biblical teaching. When you get into the higher degrees with the Scottish Rite, with the York Rite, all that kind of stuff, the teachings get more bizarre. Now, here's some of the symbols. Here's what Albert Pike. Now, like I say, a lot of people nowadays say, "Hey, we don't tell us about Albert Pike," but they look to him as an authority. Now, they may want to get away from him now because more people are on to what Albert Pike actually said.
Yeah. It was a little bit too open and honest with what was going on.
He shouldn't have been so open and honest. Here's what he wrote in Morals and Dogmas. It's page 819. He says, quote, "The blue degrees, which are the first 3 degrees, are the outer court or portico of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them. Their true explication is reserved for adepts and the princes of masonry."
Yeah.
So in the first 3 degrees of Blue Lodge, when you're in Hiram Abiff, the builder of the King Solomon's temple, when you get into his degrees and all that, you are giving lesser interpretation to the symbols. Now, when you start looking into where he and that other guy goes with this stuff, him and Albert Pike and Albert Mackey,
Yeah.
what they say about the symbols. The G, you see the G on the apron and
Yes.
everything?
Yeah.
Stands for generative power of the universe, which is the male sex organ.
Okay. I've heard that claim before.
The lambskin covers the Masonic deity, which is the male sex organ. Flap in front represents the female part. The compass and square represents the male and female sex organs. The compass coming down on the square is the active coming down upon the passive. The point within the circle once again represents the active and the passive, the reproductive act. Some would say this is why a woman cannot be a Mason. Now, there are some lodges that are co-ed, I think. You don't have to be a member of the Eastern Star, which is the women's organization. But if you're coming from the main temple, they only have men. You have to be a male to be a Mason.
Okay.
On July 14th, 1889, in his final address to the 23rd Supreme Council of the World of Freemasonry in Paris, France, Albert Pike said these words, quote, "Yes, Lucifer is God."
Wow.
I mean, that's what he said in his farewell address. Maybe he was a little bit inebriated or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe he was kind of confused, but that's what the quote is.
Well, I know that Albert Pike was extremely heavy into the Jewish occult system called Kabbalah.
Yeah.
And he wrote, "The Kabbalah alone consecrates the alliance of the universal reason and the divine word. It establishes by the counterpoises of the two forces apparently opposite the eternal balance of being. It alone reconciles reason with faith, power with liberty, science with mystery. It has the keys of the present, the past, and the future. The Bible, with all the allegories it contains, expresses in an incomplete and veiled manner only the religious science of the Hebrews."
Yeah.
Now, I would ask you, can any Christian agree with that statement?
No.
That the Bible is only an incomplete and veiled expression of truth?
No.
No. It's
No.
absolutely antithetical to Christianity. So anyone who would call themselves a Mason had better take a big, strong look at what the highest levels of Masonry, including Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike.
You just cannot ignore these guys.
What is he teaching? It's not Christian.
Yeah. Yeah, here's something with the Royal Arch degree of the York Rite, which is, you have the Scottish Rite and the York Rite. This is from an article, quote, "They are told who the true God of Masonry really is." Now, Pike said what he said, but here's what the York Rite. Pike being with the Scottish Rite, and this is the York Rite, which I'm reading about now. "They are given the name of God who was lost during the building of Solomon's temple. And the secret name of the God of Masonry is Jobulon."
Jobulon.
Jahbulon. The name Jobulon comes from a combination of 3 deities. Jah, or Yah, stands for Yahweh or Jehovah.
Yeah.
Bull is a rendering of the Canaanite god Baal, and On is the Babylonian name of the Egyptian god Osiris.
Interesting.
And this 3-headed monster, this union of Yahweh, Baal, and Osiris, is supposedly the one true God above all gods, whose identity was lost but has been recovered by the Masons.
Of course. Yeah.
So, anytime you have a secret organization with secret handshakes,
Yeah.
and you have a coin.
Reminds me of the Mormons, actually, because they are very similar.
Well, if I remember correctly, wasn't John Smith killed in Illinois?
Joseph Smith.
I'm sorry, Joseph Smith. Wasn't he killed in Illinois?
It was either that or Missouri.
He was killed some
Nauvoo.
Nauvoo.
Maybe you're right. Maybe that is Illinois, actually.
I think that he had used some of the Mason rituals in the Mormon temple.
He did. He did.
And I think some, if I remember correctly, it seems like some Masons had him killed.
Okay, I knew that he was killed by a mob.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if it was connected with the Masons or not.
Yeah.
But that would make sense.
Yeah. So, why in the world, if you are a Christian, why in the world, if you start really, if I know this stuff, if I can do research on the Masons, and I can find this stuff out, why, if you can do it, if you're a Freemason and you say you're a follower of Christ, why can't you also look at this and say, you know what, it's probably not good that I'm in this?
Yeah.
That would seem logical to me. So anyway, whether or not he was killed by a Masonic mob, that was kind of that's always been kind of one of the, I don't know, something that has been said. I don't know if it has been conclusively proven or not. But you know, there. Let me just say this: there's some talk.
Yeah.
That there's some suspicion. If you look at some of the rituals in the Mormon Church, they have secret rituals as well.
Yes. And there's actually a YouTube account by a undercover Mormon that actually goes into the temple and lets you see what they're doing in there.
Yeah.
It's got some weird stuff that they're doing.
Well, another thing in the Scottish, at the 17th degree of the Scottish Rite, you're given a secret password and a sacred word that will allow them to continue their progression through the degrees of the lodge.
Yeah.
The sacred word of Masonry is Abaddon.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of biblical in a bad way, right?
Yeah, in Revelation 9, God tells us who Abaddon is. Abaddon is the king of the demons in the pit of hell.
Yeah.
Now, you know, you can fact check this stuff. I mean, you can look this up. Now, I want to say this. There's some good people, some good men are in the Masons. I think they're misguided. I think they need to do some research. I think some of them got in because daddy was a Mason or granddaddy was a Mason or Uncle Bobby or whoever it was a Mason. They kind of, I don't say coerced them, but they kind of encouraged them. And some people back during the day, during the late 1700s, early 1800s, some people would get into the Freemasonry in order to advance their career. I mean, I have been told that if you are a Freemason and somebody else is a Freemason, you get the right of first refusal almost. I mean, you get some advantages.
Oh, it's definitely that way.
You get some opportunities.
Yeah. And talking about, you brought up the concept of Luciferianism as connected with the Masons. This is what Albert Pike had to say. Lucifer, this is again from Morals and Dogma. He says, Lucifer, the light bearer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning, is it he who bears the light, and with its splendors intolerable, blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not. For traditions are full of divine revelations and inspirations. And inspiration is not of one age, nor of one creed. Plato and Philo also were inspired.
Yeah.
So he doesn't come right out and, worship Lucifer here, but what he's saying is strange, and it sounds kind of like he's saying that Lucifer is bringing knowledge and wisdom, and that for the Masons is viewed as a good thing. Yeah, it's very bizarre, but the more you read into it, the worse it kind of sounds from a Christian point of view. And talking about the way that the Masons deliberately hide their teaching, operate in secret, require an oath, all of these things, Jesus spoke against. For example, in Matthew 5:34, but I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil.
Yeah.
So right there, as a Christian, you should know that these oaths that you have to take to join Masonry are evil.
Yeah.
That's not what Jesus had intended. And also Jesus said in John 18:20, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret.
Yeah.
So unlike the Masons, the doctrine of the Bible and the doctrine of Jesus is open.
Mm-hmm.
It's not secret.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know what Jesus taught,
Mm-hmm.
he taught it openly, and it's recorded for us in the Bible.
And if you are in an organization that's going to pray, but you can't pray in the name of Jesus, and you believe that the Muslims and you believe that the Hindus and the Mormons and you're all praying to the same God, that's not Christianity.
Not at all.
That's not. And here's what some of the Masons themselves, some of the guiding voices in the Masonic tradition, here's what they say. Albert Mackey, he says, quote, "The religion of Masonry is cosmopolitan universal," talking about it being a religion. Henry Wilson Coyle said, quote, "Religion is espoused by the Masonic ritual and required of the candidate. Freemasonry is undoubtedly religion. Many Freemasons make this flight to heaven with no other guarantee of a safe landing than their belief in the religion of Freemasonry."
Yeah.
Albert Pike said, quote, "Masonry is a universal, eternal, immutable religion." Joseph Fort Newton said, quote, "Everything in Masonry has reference to God, implies God, speaks of God, points and leads to God. Not a degree, not a symbol, not an obligation, not a lecture, not a charge, but finds its meaning and derives its beauty from God, the great architect, in whose temple all Masons are workmen." So it's a work salvation. It's an inclusive salvation. It's a Christless.
Yeah, they basically deny
You don't need Jesus for salvation.
that you need Jesus. They think that anyone who partakes of any of the religions of the world can work toward salvation.
Yeah.
And that's just, again, that's kind of like the New Age doctrine, but it's certainly not compatible with the Bible.
So you have in the York Rite, you have Jobulon, and the Scottish Rite, you had all the influence of Albert Pike.
The Kabbalah.
Yeah. You had Jobulon, in the York Rite, being the name of God. And, you start looking at all this and you thinking, how in the world can a Christian be in Freemasonry? Well, I think, like what one of them said, they don't give you the full 411 in the first 3 degrees in the Blue Lodge. But there's enough there that you ought to say, you know what? I'm not talking about Hiram Abiff, and I'm not being killed, and I'm not going to die to be resurrected in the lodge. And they go through this ritualistic ceremony about your death and resurrection into the lodge and all that kind of stuff. And it's not all fun and games. I mean, you go to a Masonic funeral, you see how things happen, and it is not all fun and games.
Yeah.
They take it real. I mean, they take death and afterlife real. And that's why, there's some good men that are in the Masons, and they can't believe all this stuff. But they got into an organization, and they may like the people that's in it, and it's may give them some advantages or whatever.
I think a whole lot of people get involved with Freemasonry because they feel like it's going to help their career, or it's going to help them in business.
Yeah.
I once knew a guy who had that exact feeling, and that's exactly why he joined up, because he thought it was going to give him, an edge, with his business, and maybe it did, but
Yeah.
that's not a good reason to get involved with something that is anti-Christian.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, if somebody's not a Christian, if they're in it, I mean, that's one thing. But if you're a Christian, you sure do not need to be recruiting other people for the lodge. You do not need to be in it yourself. I think if you are a Christian and you're in Freemason, I would renounce it. I believe there's some stuff going on with that's not good, and I think it's best if you renounce your membership. Doesn't mean you have to come out and tell everything about everything. I mean, you just come out of it and don't have anything else to do with them, and renounce it, and because it is darkness.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. If somebody else came to me and said, I'm in an organization and we believe that there's salvation apart from Christ. We believe that you get to heaven by good works. We believe that Muslims and Mormons and Hindus and Buddhists, we're all going to heaven if we live a good enough life. I'd tell any church member, I'd say, you need to get out of that organization. What in the world are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, that's totally contrary to clear biblical teaching.
Just the very fact that it's secretive, that alone should clue you in that something's not right.
Yeah.
If you're all the way on the up and up, then why are you meeting and speaking in secret and refusing to let outsiders know what your true doctrines are?
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really obvious. It's not rocket science to figure out if you're hiding stuff, then you're not on the up and up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, that's kind of, you know, somebody asks about Freemasonry. There's the hidden symbols, there's the secretiveness, there's the blood oaths, there's salvation apart from Christ, there's the celestial lodge, there's the burial ceremony, which, you know, I was at one time and I did part of a funeral. We got to the graveside and I was like, I'm not participating in this. I needed a pastor to come do something at the graveside. And they were doing all that Masonic ritual stuff.
Yeah.
And I was kind of taken off guard.
Yeah.
And me and a couple other pastors were there. And I'm like, I'm not going to go out there and be a part of whatever else they're doing. They had all these like interlocking spears and they had on the aprons and they had all this. I didn't know some of the stuff they were saying. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to go out there and be a part of that.
Right. Of course not.
And I mean, so.
And you see these guys at the stop sign, you know, holding out a boot. The Shriners wanting you to give money.
Yeah.
Don't just give money to an organization that you don't know anything about just because they're out there asking for money.
Yeah.
That's not making you a good person.
And the Shriners do, I mean, those hospitals do fantastic work. They help kids in need, and I fully acknowledge that.
Like Scottish Rite Children's Hospital, right? Is it a children's hospital?
There's a Scottish Rite Children's Hospital.
Is that in Atlanta? Or?
I think so. And so they do great things. I mean, I'm not negating that. But it's an organization that is a religious organization.
Yeah.
They have a way of salvation. They have rituals that they do. They believe that through their whatever it is, their organization or whatever they espouse, that gives you entrance into the celestial lodge in the sky. And so for any Christian out there, we're not saying that you're, you know, into Satanism or the occult or anything like that, but the higher you get up, there's some stuff that you find out that you ought to know. I don't need to be a part of this. Now, the Blue Lodge, they may not know everything. They may not, even when you're a child, sometimes, you know, people, you know, well, do you promise not to do this? And we'll cut your belly button out and all this stuff if you divulge anything, you know. But you got to.
I'll tell you something a little creepy about Masons. They also have their own dating system. Did you know that?
What?
And I don't mean dating like going on a date. I mean, what year is it? They have their own year. And it's the year of light.
You're going to do emason.com or something.
No, it's Anno Lucius.
What? Lucius?
Yes, Anno Lucius. You'll see it on all the Masonic plaques.
Okay.
It'll have a year AL, Anno Lucius. And we already know from Albert Pike that they refer to Lucifer as the bearer of light.
Yeah.
Well, Anno Lucius means year of light.
Yeah.
But you could also take it perhaps to mean year of Lucifer.
Yeah.
But it also is interesting because it adds 4,000 years to the Gregorian year. So it basically goes back to creation.
Oh.
Or does it go back to the fall, the year of light, the year of Lucifer? Interesting.
That is very interesting. Now, let me say this. There's a lot to deal with our capital. The way some people believe that the way the Frenchmen laid out our whole capital area, that it has some Masonic meaning, and people can go on all of this stuff, the Washington Monument and all that stuff, and, you know, being obelisk and whatever it is. If it is, it is. If it's not, it's not. But George Washington, he laid the Masonic foundation to the Capitol. Did you know that? Most of you buildings,
well, no, I had heard.
Most of the buildings in Washington, D.C. actually have Masonic stones out front.
Okay.
You know, so many of those buildings everywhere have a Masonic marker. And I reckon they're Masons, you know, or the whole tradition of Masonry would come into play with that. Yes, September 18, 1793, George Washington conducted the laying of the cornerstone at the U.S. Capitol. Here's what the local newspaper said at the time. Quote, on Wednesday, one of the grandest Masonic processions took place for the purpose of laying the cornerstone of the capital of the United States, which perhaps was ever exhibited on the like important occasion. About 10 o'clock, Lodge number 9 was visited by that congregation, so graceful to the craft. And they did call it, some called it the craft. Lodge number 22 of Virginia with all their officers and regalia, and directly afterward appeared on the southern bank of the Grand River Potomac. One of the finest companies of volunteer artillery that has ever been lately seen, parading to receive the President of the United States. The President of the United States and his attendant brethren ascended from the Cavazion to the east of the cornerstone, and there the Grand Master Pro Tem, elevated on a triple rostrum, delivered an oration fitting the occasion, which was received with brotherly love and commendation. So there you have it. It was the laying of the cornerstone for the U.S. Capitol. George Washington and his Masonic brethren.
Yeah.
A big ceremony.
You will find that, Masonry is all
a lot
over
of the presidents,
country.
Several of the presidents. I mean, Harry Truman. I think maybe Ford was a.
But now,
Mason.
if I understood what you read from your research, you would basically, if you're saying that it really started with Albert Pike,
yeah,
bringing
these guys
in the
were prior
paganism.
to Pike, so they were more in the Blue Lodge type
so
stuff.
these guys weren't necessarily, these
well, a lot of them
guys like Washington and these Masons.
It was not as nefarious as
they
it
may
seems
not have
to
been
become.
involved with this pagan stuff that came with.
But still,
with
at the
Albert
same
Pike.
time, you have to start asking some questions. Why in the world am I wearing this apron?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, like, is Albert Pike really the first one? Or, I don't know. It's an interesting question, but, and it's hard to know because they're secretive.
Yeah.
So what can you can only figure out what has been leaked, right?
Yes.
It's not altogether unlike trying to speculate about what the government is doing behind closed doors, right?
Yes.
They're almost equally.
So we're not going to go into a big, grand Dan Brown conspiracy theory pertaining to the Freemasons.
Right. Going back to the Illuminati.
Yeah, but we just want to approach it from the viewpoint if you're a Christian and you're in Freemasonry, you need to exit.
Yeah, I would agree there.
You need to get out. And Paul, anything else you want to say about Freemasonry? I mean, there's so much more we could say. I mean, we've just skimmed the surface.
All we can really do is skim the surface, but I think from a Christian perspective, obviously you and I are Christians, and we would encourage everyone, if you're not a Christian, examine the evidence, because the best evidence we have points to Jesus being exactly who he said he was, and that means that the Bible is true, Christianity is true, but that's not compatible with Freemasonry.
Yeah, and you can't be good enough to go to heaven. That's why Jesus came to die on the cross.
Yeah.
Well, you need to live a good life. I mean, that exemplifies the character of Christ.
Yeah.
And,
but
we should.
Freemasonry is wrong when it teaches that all religions lead to God. All religions have a basis in truth. That's just not the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's only one true religion, and that's the religion of Jesus Christ.
That's exactly right. So I'm sure we'll get a little bit of feedback on this episode.
I hope so. I like feedback.
I would think so. Remember Paul Price?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Direct your hate mail
we do invite
to
your
me.
feedback, and maybe we kind of said something in a way we need to say differently or whatever. But these are kind of the just stuff you can go find out on your own if you do a little bit of research.
Exactly. And
so once again, if you're in Freemasonry, if you're a Christian, my recommendation is to leave, get out. It's a competing religion, and it demotes Christ. And so it would actually be in place of Christ, which would actually be
Antichrist. Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of The Uncensored Pilgrims. We hope you have a great week, and we will see you next time. And we need to let you know that the views that we express on this podcast belong to Marty McLain and Paul Price. They are our views. They do not reflect the views of anyone else. And with that said, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.